Today's guest on Adversity to Strength is Jennifer Finch, best known as the bassist for the groundbreaking all-female rock band L7. As part of the fierce wave of 90s grunge and punk, Jennifer and L7 broke barriers in a male-dominated industry using unapologetic energy, raw lyrics and activism to make their mark on music history. But behind the music, Jennifer's story is also one of resilience, navigating the chaos of fame, the pressures of the industry, and her own battles with mental health. She's had to learn what it means to rebuild identity and purpose outside of the spotlight. Today, she continues to create, mentor, and advocate, showing that strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up louder than before. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, Jennifer.
It's so nice to meet you, Lee. How are you doing today?
I'm all good. I'll be honest, I've been counting down the days because I've really been looking forward to speaking to you. Some guests, I mean, all my guests have been great, but some guests, I'm like, I've got this question, I've got that question. I really want to hear this. I really want to hear that. So yeah, I'm glad that the moment's finally here. Take us back to the beginning. Where did your journey start, wherever that was?
Oh, thank you for asking. I was born in Los Angeles, California, to a British father who came to the U.S. to work in the industry and avionic. He was I don't know what you say, sort of an airflow mechanic engineer, and came to the U.S. I was adopted, fortunately, and my mom, I call them my mom and my dad, even though I'm adopted. Wow, this isn't starting out that great. I'm usually in better flow with it.
It's all good.
They were very interesting people. They were older parents. There was possibly some mental health issues that were unaddressed. And unfortunately, they divorced, and I went sort of back into the foster system and in and out until my father ended up being able to adopt me, where I was raised by him. And by the time I was 14, I got into drugs and punk rock. It's sort of like both, in one hand, sort of saved me and allowed me to be more more present. But also, of course, drugs are progressive. So I became an IV drug addict, opiate addict for 10 years. I got clean, and I have been clean since 1990. And so I've been on an adventure through my life of being able to be a creative, being an entrepreneur, being able to do good things in this world and supporting other people, while just being curious about myself and picking up those pieces.
It sounds like it was a eventful start to your life there for you as well. And obviously with your parents there as well, and living in Los Angeles, that must have been interesting one, even if you're kind of like born there as well. How did you find living in LA?
Living in Los Angeles, being born in Los Angeles, is much different than people who are attracted to Los Angeles. In the US kind of culture mythology, the West Coast is the last place you could go for freedom. Like there's this, manifest destiny, move west, young man kind of mentality and vibe through the US. So California is sort of the last place to go, or the dream destination. The film industry was here, different. The real estate industry was huge. And growing up here, I don't know, it's just like a different kind of energy than coming here.
What about your love of music? Where did that come from?
Well, I think that I just started to go out to local scenes. So it was more about community, and music was a part of it. I've always seen punk rock not as a genre, but as something that was a part of a scene that, included skateboarding, art, getting together, even queerness, as a collective.
And what about like actually becoming a musician? When did you decide that you wanted to?
I started as a photographer and photographing my scene and photographing, kids my age. Also as a drug addict, I was photographing a lot of use. And I just at one point thought, I think I want to try to play music and see what this is like. And I went in, I started playing maybe like around the high school age, 16, 17. And by the time I was 18, I joined a band with my friend Courtney Love, who went on to become an actress and the singer of Hole, and another woman named Kat, who's in a band called Babes in Toyland eventually. So it was sort of our first band. We moved to San Francisco and recorded and played shows. And then by 1986, I was into something a little bit heavier. I wanted like a harder rock experience, and L7 needed a bass player. So I left that to go join L7.
What was it like knowing Courtney Love, or meeting Courtney Love? Because obviously everybody knows who she is. Obviously Kurt Cobain, which I'm sure we'll come to. I think most people probably heard of her first of all as the girlfriend and then wife of Kurt Cobain. How did you meet her?
In the Los Angeles scene, I was friends with her boyfriend, and we all went to a show together in 1983, New Year's Eve show. And I just adored her, fell in love with her immediately. She was not like any other person I met, highly intelligent, charismatic, was interested in art, was interested in music, and it was just a natural fit. And we
And
did
you
drugs.
and did you?
And we did drugs. I mean, like, let's just get honest.
Was that so in that scene? So you already sort of like taken sort of drugs there. Was there a particular reason for that, or was it something you just fell into with the crowd, or do you think there's any other reason behind that then?
It's an interesting question, but I do come from a belief system that works for me and not from other people, but that addiction is an internal mechanism. It's a disease. And to just keep it very simple, its symptoms are obsession, compulsion, fear, denial, and destructive self-centeredness. It lays on top of trauma very easily. It lays on top of the
Yes.
victim victimization
Yeah.
narrative very easily. And that's how it expressed in me. It was a relief. I remember the first time that I used opiates. It was the first time I felt relief from self as a young person at 14. So in a sense, I often talk about drugs saved me, which is do not use drugs, kids. But, that's my reality. And I like to speak to that when I can, is that was the relief that I needed. There wasn't enough talk therapy. There wasn't enough spiritual therapy. There wasn't enough religion or prescriptive lifestyle. There wasn't enough education. That was just my path.
I've had many clients say same as yourself, exactly the same thing. It's the and as a therapist, my rule of thumb is alcohol is to ease the pain, drugs is to forget. That's kind of
Hmm.
my standard rules of thumb with clients, and it seems to be pretty accurate there as well. What about music? I mean, you getting into your music there as well, and was that escapism? Was it just a passion for music? Was it how did that affect you when you started getting into that?
So I love performance is probably when I say that I'm a visual artist and a musician, what I'm really talking about is performance. I love performance art. I love the idea of walking into a space and collaborating with other people. And then when we walk out, it disappears. Nothing is left but memory and the connection with the people that you're with. And that was something that I just developed very early on, like an understanding going and seeing, these smaller punk rock shows where the audience is just as important as the performers. Like there's a
Yeah.
collaboration in the expression and in the performance. And I think that early on, I was just really thinking about, wow, I'm in Los Angeles. This is where people have careers in entertainment and film. It's where the bad behaviors of drug addiction can almost be celebrated or looked at
Yeah.
as a benefit. So I was like, well, I'll either be maybe something in the film industry where I go work really hard for a week and then I can do drugs. Like this is the thinking of a young person. This is not the
Yeah.
reality, or I'll join a band and I can do drugs as much as I want, rock and roll. And that's a lot of that is what the media told me. That was how it comes down, how it came down to me through media. And that was just my impression. I thought, oh, well, playing music is not that hard. It came actually quite easy. I mentioned my father was an engineer. So I think I sort of picked up a lot of sort of engineer style thinking, which music kind of falls into. And, it's just sort of a matter of practice. And I knew I never wanted to be great at music. I never wanted to be excellent at anything. I actually valued, the nuances of being an amateur, of just going out and doing it and seeing what happens and what the expression would look like, more the art side of it.
Well, do you remember the night that or the day that you and Courtney Love formed the band or come up with the idea? What happened there? Because for me, sitting here going, this lady was in a band with Courtney Love. It's like, well, that's it. That's pretty good going.
Yeah. So I think that, a lot of the attraction is, Courtney is can't like, her thinking can be very disordered, like her way of execution and thinking. So there wasn't a lot of like, she would have an idea and know how to get from point A to point B, which seemed always very natural to me. Like, oh, you want to be in a band? We go look at other people who are in bands. What do they do? I mean, literally that was, Courtney was more looking at like fashion magazines and music magazines and going, I want to look like this. I want to be like this. I want to sound like this. Where I was from Los Angeles, I was like, well, how do we actually book a show? How do we didn't know what
Yeah.
practice was. You don't really know how to do it until you meet other musicians. And so that was always like the curiosity of, and I was in Los Angeles. So I was around really great local musicians, part of like maybe bands that have gotten more successful have coming out of Los Angeles have been like the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and knowing them and just seeing what they do, like how they rent a space to go practice, how they sit down and write songs. So was there a moment? Yeah, I can't really describe a moment. I think it's a lot of long-ended conversations and late nights and going out and seeing other art events and seeing music events and kind of coming to the conclusion that no adults were really going to help us. And it was something that we were going to do on our own.
Do you remember your first live performance? I mean, you must, obviously.
Well,
What was it like?
Okay, so I come from a very arty background, and
Sure.
I was in a performance group when I was 16 and we would go to UCLA, University of California, which is, I grew up
Yeah.
close, and we would go into parking garages and plug our amps in and just tell people that we were going to play in a parking garage. And we would just perform and play impromptu sort of,
Yeah.
broken down sounds and banging on drums and like kind of that 80s stuff that you see like lighting garbage cans on fire. And the
Yeah.
performance was over when the police showed up. But that
Of course.
kind of was my first performance. So, I mean, it was definitely going to be more disciplined when I was playing in a band with Courtney and
Yeah.
Kat. We played in a venue in San Francisco. We were living in San Francisco called the Firehouse, and it was our first show. And we asked a friend of ours to we had these small amps and to come to our house and pick up our amps. And he canceled at the last minute. And we were both, no, we were going to play anyway. And Kat, Courtney, and I dragged our amps and we put them on the city bus, and we took the bus to the venue and unloaded them off the bus and loaded them into the venue. And we didn't know how to sound check, or we didn't know what any of this meant. We just sort of pretended that we knew what we were doing and played a show.
How old were you at the time?
It's 18, 19, probably
Pretty good
19.
guy.
Well, when you're young, you don't know. When you're older,
No,
you
yeah,
know.
exactly.
Now, if anyone said you have to go play the show and take the bus, I think I don't know if I'd do it.
And did you start getting to know other bands around at that particular time? So what sort of year would we be talking about them? The early 80s?
1986.
1986.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So
1986. 85 was when we put the band together, and 86 was about when it was already apparent that it wasn't really going to work out. No one was quite serious enough
Right.
to put in the time to practice or put in what was needed. Brittany's method was just to talk to a lot of people, tell them that she was in a band, and hope that maybe we would be discovered, because she didn't really know. And Kat and I were like, no, we really need to do this band. And Kat left and started Babes in Toyland. And then, a couple years later, Courtney moved back down to LA when L7 was kind of doing well through 87, 88, 89. And she came back down and like admitted she really wanted to be in a band that was going to work. And she put together Whole and got serious about it and went to practice spaces and wrote songs and pulled together a great group of musicians, the first lineup of Whole, and she had been writing, been following her writing for years at that point, and wrote some beautiful songs and got it together.
What do you think the difference was from her a couple of years ago with the original band to where she was when she's come back with Whole?
I think that's really her story to tell, but I think it's just sort of, I see it in people who really want to make a difference in the world, and they really want their art to forefront, but often they get kind of stuck in the process, or they don't want to, or they're just not comprehending like maybe steps to take to go ahead and do it. And often, I counsel friends with this, like a lot of times, like the successes that we want, our production of who we are, our production of our art or our message or our expression is so important and takes so long to develop. But there really is all of the other founding things that we need to do to put the podcast together, to do the social media, which is actually media, to be able to advocate for ourselves publicly or with friends and create newsletter lists. I mean, it goes on and on. And I think
Yeah,
that that's just a thing, that you're not going to hear from Deborah Harry, who we were talking about earlier,
yeah,
the
yeah.
singer of Blondie, who has had an incredible, long, productive career. She's probably not, no one wants to sit down with her and hear about like how they've had to promote the band themselves many times. They want it to just be a rock and roll fantasy, but usually it isn't, but particularly for people with long standing careers.
Yeah, I mean, your career spanned what, over 40 years? 40
Sure.
years?
I joined L7. L7 formed with Danita Sparks and Susie Gardner in 1985. So while I was in San Francisco, I knew them and was following the band. And by 86, they needed a bass player. So I jumped in. So we are actually in Los Angeles doing 40-year anniversary show in, excuse me, October
That's
of this
brilliant.
year.
That's great. That's such an achievement for any band to reach 40 years, because I mean the vast majority last what, 2 or 3 years?
The secret is don't give up. If you need a break, take a break
Yeah.
for everything in life.
They're like the Eagles.
But I mean, I think it's worked. Some of my best relationships that I've had, best friends, sometimes you just have to take a bit of a break and grow separately and then come back together.
With yourself though, your band L7, you were together for a long time. You're going into the 90s.
Mm-hmm. Sure. We started touring. We were one of the first bands on Epitaph Records. So anyone who's sort of a fan of punk rock, that was Bad Religion's label run by Brett Gurwitz. We were one of the first releases on Epitaph. We toured with Bad Religion through the late 80s. We refocused and got on Sub Pop Records in 1990. Prior to that, we did tours based on our affiliation or association with Sub Pop, who sort of became famous for the founding of grunge, what was called grunge. We
Yeah.
came to the UK in 91 and toured with Nirvana through the UK and also in Europe. And that was a great kind of leg up for us. They still didn't have any of the success we know them today. And,
Yeah.
we were, good friends with them and still are remaining members who are still alive. L7 just did some tours with Foo Fighters. Dave Grohl's, who was the drummer of
Yeah.
Nirvana at the time, now fronts the Foo Fighters. And we just did a tour with them this year. So it all comes back
Yeah.
to 1990.
So with like Nirvana, how did you get to meet Nirvana then? Because obviously
We were on Sub Pop.
Sub Pop,
Yeah, we were all
right?
on Sub Pop. Yeah. So I had met Kurt first
Yeah,
before he had met Courtney, and they had met. Both of them never remembered, but they had met prior to sort of, they always say it was in 91, but I know that they had met prior to that. And L7 pulled together a series of shows called Rock for Choice, and Nirvana headlined the first show, and Courtney really wanted to meet Kurt. So they kind of cite that as one of the first shows that they had met. And maybe it was the first show that they really had talked to each other, but I know they'd met prior to that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, because it's like a classic relationship. It's one of those that stands out in the 90s. It's such a 90s relationship there. I mean, what was Kurt Cobain? I know you've been asked this a million times, but was he just a regular guy? Could you tell there's something special about this guy?
I couldn't. I'm just kidding. I think that a lot when we look at Courtney, what you're seeing is a caricature that she has kind of developed for the public eye. But Kurt
Right.
was definitely, you got what you got. Like what you see is what you got. He's very shy, very soft spoken, but he's also very intelligent. And he was also
Yeah.
like myself, were very, I don't want to say calculated, but we sort of understood what it was going to take to move to do next steps or move the band forward. He was that person in Nirvana. So he, was very aware of what they were doing when they went to go interview with major labels in Los Angeles to take the next steps in their careers.
Were you around them at the time that they were releasing like Lithium Smells Like Teen Spirit? Because that album, it's just an unbelievable album.
Lee, did you know that Dave and I dated? Are you
Yes.
kidding you that or no?
I did know. I did know.
People don't like to tiptoe around that. Yes. So I was around.
Oh no, no, because there's you did a recent article. I put a lot of research. Did an article like defending him and standing up for him and all this sort of stuff there as well, and what have you. You were obviously that you dated and you're married as well. Is that right? Married?
No, no, we're not married.
Just date,
I have been married. I
but not
love a
to
good
date.
wedding. I love a
Yeah.
good wedding, but I've only had one. I love a good divorce too. My husband and I had a very like separation with love style divorce. His name is Chris Pedersen. He was also an actor. I just said
Who's the,
also. He was an actor.
who's it? Yeah.
He was in some 80s films, Platoon,
What's his
Firewalk
name?
with Me. Chris Pedersen.
Chris Pettis.
Point, Point Break. He always played sort of the California blonde surfer that has gone wrong. He was always sort of a bad guy in the films.
Who's he in Point Break? 'Cause I've seen that a
Or
million times.
I have never seen it. There's a
Oh,
very strange thing you need to know about me. I don't
okay.
watch films. I just don't watch films.
Point Break, I love it. And me and my best friend Joe, we used to watch Point Break growing up over and over. And one of the guys from Red Hot Chili Peppers gets his foot blown off. He's in it as well. I'm
Sure.
assuming.
Sure.
Yeah,
So my ex-husband was in, I guess, the same gang as
yeah.
Anthony Kiedis, like the same sort of group of bad guys. But he played the blonde, sort of thuggy bad guy.
Right, yeah. No, I think he might well have had a fight with Patrick Swayze in that, which is pretty good there. Uh, so obviously you're dating obviously Dave Grohl, and at the time, did you know that Nirvana were going to be the band that they become? I mean, they're
No,
just
absolutely not.
no,
Not what they became. I knew they were such good songwriters. They were such good entertainers, but there was no way to predict that success. That level, like international, worldwide, change the industry
yeah,
type of
yeah.
success, that they would be the ones.
Yeah, I mean the cover of the album is just legendary. It's just
Sure,
an
sure.
amazing cover. The video for me, I mean, I'm always somebody that I'm still listening to 60s and 70s when people are starting to listen to grunge and like Oasis are starting to appear and stuff like that. So I always had to catch up, and I'd never watched modern music that much. Probably not as most that I did. But I remember MTV or something like that, and the video to Smells Like Teen Spirit, they're all in that like underground club, and I'd never seen a video like it, and it was just
Hmm.
unbelievable. I
Sure.
can't think of another song similar to that. The amount of like, friends that I knew that bought the album just on that song, and the fact that the album's brilliant as well. That's the Smells Like Teen Spirit was just good enough on its own. Such a great song there. That surely that was that the point when you thought, yeah, they're going to take off now when you saw that? Or were you still thinking, nah, not, this isn't going to happen?
Yeah, I think when they were doing back in that day before your record came out, you would do pre-press.
Yeah.
And when it started, the level of pre-press that came in seemed to be very explosive. Also, I think for the UK, they were so part of this like I don't know what you call it, like gossip magazine narrative
Oh,
where
yeah,
they were
yeah.
drilling down to all these sort of different ways to like more personal relationships in the band, then it started to seem like it was going to be take off a little bit differently. L7 was actually in the studio when Nevermind was released. L7 was in the studio with Butch Vig, who was the producer of Nevermind, making our record, Bricks Are Heavy, which came out a little bit later in that year. Yeah, we were in the studio just watching all of this press pouring out, just reading all the magazines, like all of the television shows that they had gotten. And we were like, okay, this is something different's happening here.
Yeah. Um, we used, well, what was like, obviously, your partner at the time saying, and like Kurt Cobain saying about this, did they had any idea, or how were they taking it? Because from what I've read, Kurt Cobain always seemed to struggle with it.
I think that it's definitely, I've been just in my perspective. Dave and I separated at a certain point that year, although we remained friends, just because we were both so busy. There was no way to be in the same situation. And also, like, I low key didn't want like a boyfriend or husband who was more successful than I was. I could see that I was taking off. And I say that lovingly and jokingly, and then like with the most like trauma
Yeah.
behind it that you can imagine. I think that they started out to do, so I'm going to say Kurt. I think Kurt really masterminded that maneuver to get
Yeah.
on a major label. And I think that quickly it was in his control, and then it became out of his control. And I think that's one of the, I don't know, what do you say in your profession? I'd say like psychosis or something that kind of was brought on by all of a sudden like a lack of being able to hold on to the narrative and having it
Yeah.
be so much beyond him and, literally being controlled by an outside entity that I don't think he necessarily agreed with.
Yeah. How
I
much
mean,
do you think that affected him? Because a
I
lot of
don't
people,
know.
yeah, because a lot of people can like they want control, and you see
Yeah,
artists
the
falling out
funny
with
thing
their
is
labels. And,
it's difficult to talk about him because he's not here to defend himself. So
sure,
there's no way to really ever know
answer.
what
Yeah,
the true situation is, and all we can do is lay our own stories on top of what we know about him, right?
yeah.
So at a certain point I'm just telling you about me and talking about him where you could be talking about me.
With yourself moving on to like the mid 90s, whereabouts would you say L7 were, and where were you? Where were you at with your life? Because obviously your relationship with Dave has kind of come to an end, and the Nirvana had obviously, obviously what had happened there as well. So whereabouts were you with everything?
Yeah, I mean, L7, very typically of that era, we just went on tour for 3 years straight. It was just like part of that grind of being on the road, making records. L7's song Pretend We're Dead was on the top of the pops in the UK, and I was still working a day job. There
Yeah,
wasn't, yeah, there wasn't a lot of I don't know, like how, let's just say as women, we were never burdened with the financial success of our male counterparts, how they were, we know. So there's just a lot of time away from home and there wasn't really a lot of time to grow up. And I think by 96, I'd lost my father. We'd experienced a couple of deaths that were of people close to us. Kurt's death, and then there was a big tour festival in 1993 called Lollapalooza. It was Nirvana were going to headline it, and L7 were on it with our peers. We just had to go do that 2-month tour without Nirvana. Like the living just in the wake of Kurt's death was uh, really
yeah.
taxing. Right. And
I
then
mean,
it just
yeah.
kept going from there. And by 96, I took that break that I'm
I
talking
think,
about.
yeah, I think you've earned it because you've been. I mean, I've like, I had a Jay Aston from Bucks Fizz come on the podcast, and she was amazing. And she was saying about the tour and that you're on stage, it's amazing, and then you're just in a hotel room, and then you're traveling, and it's just like there's only so long you can do that. Did you find it the same? Same?
Yeah, I mean, I think we know more now about like mental health and physical health than we
Yeah,
did back then. I think back
yeah.
then it was really about, grind it out as hard as you can and then drink it off at night, and then just keep
Exactly
going.
what she's.
I was already clean by 1990. So if you can imagine, I was like, around, I mean, I was stepping on heroin needles like in our buses to get to my bunk. Everybody was
Yeah.
using through the 90s. Yeah, and so there was like a different level of sort of being like being able to grow through it and then also kind of being heavily taxed by it.
So you said you stopped taking drugs in what 1990
At drugs
and
and alcohol.
and alcohol.
Yeah.
How come? What happened there? What was the reason behind stopping
Well,
there?
I started using when I was 14, and by the time I was 24, the drugs didn't work. I was having very adverse effects. Also, as a young user, I was exposed to all the things that young users are exposed to. I was a chronic runaway. I was not really home from age 14 to 19. So I was exposed to a lot of violence and, sexual assault and just the things that, that the drug addict story, the young person's drug addict story. And by a certain point, I just knew that I needed to stop and kept struggling with stopping and then finally did.
How did you manage to stop?
12 step.
12 step. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't not go to treatment. There was not, I don't even remember there really being treatment in California at the time, just available to young people.
Yeah. You would
There were a
assume,
couple
yeah.
hospitals that did detox, but yeah, detox was easy. There was methadone and clinics, but there wasn't that, wraparound, next year of treatment or recovery,
How did you
if
feel
that makes
once you were,
sense.
yeah, yeah, of course. How did you feel once you were clean?
Terrible. Getting clean is
Yeah.
awful. Getting clean is terrible. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I mean, life is so much better lived if you have easy access to things that can fix you immediately that don't have any side effects or long-term consequences. If I could do it, I would. If I could eat candy all day long, I would. If I could,
Yeah.
doom scroll all day long, I would.
Yeah.
For some reason, all that, that thing that we were talking about, obsession, compulsion, fear, denial, and destructive self-centeredness,
Yeah.
take away the drugs, that still lives. That is still there. And it gets louder because it's not being dulled by any immediate access, any short-term energy pieces, So yeah, awkward, and it felt terrible. And I really do feel like if you're a young person that uses drugs and you get clean, really I was coming into my life at 24, like a 14-year-old,
Right.
emotionally and
Yeah. How
cognitively.
did you deal with that? How did you deal with that? Because suddenly you're clean, and then you're facing the world, and you're like, well, I've got to almost make up for lost time.
I didn't have those thoughts. I mean, really, the disease of addiction had devastated me both externally and internally for so long. They talk about unmanageability, right? Is one of the first things you sort of look at, that people can look at in their lives. Like, where are your values being compromised, or where are you, like, just leaving the car parked somewhere and you don't know where it is? I mean, to losing apartments, to losing relationships. As a young person, I never really established anything in order to lose. So it was really looking at, the gaping internal unmanageability, and like the sadness and like bouts of depression and mania that never really qualified as anything diagnosable and to be treated, other than the disease of addiction. So really, part of my story is that I went to 12-step community, and I filled my day with doing something other than focusing on the finding and using of drugs.
How did you manage to stay clean, stay sober? Because the fact that you're in that world, I mean, especially the 90s as well, and you're right, like you said, you're on a tour bus and it's just full of people that's taking heroin. How did you stay clean in that environment? Because that must be the hardest part.
Yeah, I think that, I just prescribed to the idea of I don't have to use today. And no matter, how I'm feeling in the moment, then is how am I feeling in the moment will pass. I have different kind of tools that I use now today. And that, that idea of, okay, I have a right to feel this way. Like, it's okay to feel this way. Because that was something
Yeah.
that was not talked about in the 80s.
No.
But that it didn't define me, that it would pass, that it was something that would pass. Because I don't know, as an addict, I would, from having like a devastating moment happening as a kid, like, a loss, like a loss of life or a change, was just as emotionally as intense as like breaking a toenail, so like there wasn't like a lot of discernment between, pain and comfort and relief. Right. So really that first, I always just say when I work with, because I still work with peer-to-peer work with women who are transitioning from prison or that are getting clean. And I always just say the first year, 3 years is just keeping you alive. I'm just keeping you alive, so you don't go do dead
Yeah.
people stuff. Right. So it's kind of processing through all of that. And that's just what I did those first 3 years.
How did you get into helping women leave prison and overcome what they've been through?
Just the community, word of mouth, it's peer to peer, non professional support. So it is really about, reference from people in my communities that know other people that know other people that just want to be able to live life clean and be able to apply recovery and live in recovery and be fulfilled and be able to step into that.
That's a great thing to do. What made you decide to be a part of that?
I really believe that in order to be successful in life, this is just my philosophy, that anything in life, if you want to move forward or you desire to move forward, you need to teach what you know to the person behind you. That
Yeah.
way you will move
Yeah.
forward either spiritually, emotionally, mentally, whatever you're
Yeah.
looking at, even in business. You teach what you know to others, just codifies what you're doing so that you can move on to the next phase, step, whatever it looks like.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes perfect sense. So going back to the 90s, it sounds like it was a real heavy time for you. There's so much that had gone on, and you were physically and mentally burnt out by like the mid 90s.
Yeah, completely burnt out. And then my father passed away, who I said was
Yeah.
raised me initially. And that was there, I had no other family. And that was just entirely, that was very devastating. But also, in the same time, I started playing with another band called Other Star People, which never really got the footing that L7 did. But we made a great record with Roy Thomas Baker, who was the producer of Queen and Journey, and who relocated to the United States, and just a great record called Diamonds in the Belly of the Dog, and did more touring. But at that point, I could dictate more of how we were going to do it and to what excess and to what end and what made more sense with it.
And was that around the time you wanted to take the break?
Yeah. So, I mean, I took a break from L7 and went
Right.
to go do Other Star People.
You're not giving yourself an actual break from
I
work.
did. I did. I mean, I
So
think that, yeah, we did, though. There was
you
breaks in it,
managed to
in the
recover.
touring schedule. Yeah, it wasn't as so brutal as L7 is really brutal. Even to this day, I find that the way that L7 does business is still very brutal. Like
Yeah.
how we travel. Yeah, it's just sort of the nature of L7's like choices. They'd rather just small things are like long
Is,
sound checks or yeah, just small things.
do you think you could do it any other way nowadays, or do you think that's how long we've been doing it? That's part of us. That's how it's always going to be.
Yeah, I think that when you're in a group and you're working with a group of people, you need to be sensitive to your own needs and take care of yourself. But also, the group is people coming together, and they come together in certain ways and with certain needs and certain values and how that's expressed and what they struggle against and what they don't. I find collaborative groups so interesting, so it's like it's not my place to disrupt the group in that sense. I've made suggestions, and those suggestions are either taken or not taken, but it is what it is.
So do you, with the group then, because you've been together so long there, how if you managed to last so long? Because you see groups that fall, look at Oasis or whatever, so many bands break up, they fall out, they go in different directions. How come you guys have managed to stay together consistently for so many years?
I think that is one of the most interesting questions that I'm in the middle of, a lived example of how to answer it. And I still do not fully have an answer, because I too am fascinated by groups, whether it's a band or whatever, a marriage or a
Yeah,
work community, a collaborative work community. And why is it that some fall apart and some don't? And it's not that I think longevity is like any kind of indicator of success, because some of the marriages and businesses and bands can be short-lived and still produce great things.
yeah,
Yeah, I just bands go through phases in cultural context. Like they go through phases of how people see them and their production. And sometimes it really is just, don't break up, take a break.
yeah,
And
yeah. I think it's
Oasis, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not a huge fan. I love when I hear their songs, I love it, but they're brothers, right?
yeah, they got a
I'm
band, but you got Noel and
Yeah,
Liam.
so I mean
They
they're
spent
family,
years,
so
they spent years not speaking to each other, and they reformed sort of fairly recently in touring, and the people queuing up and what have you.
but maybe, we say like, oh, they spent years not speaking to each other, and we look at that as some kind of failing, but maybe it's not the failing. I don't know them, right? But maybe that's not the failing. Maybe just taking a break is what you need and can come back
I
together
think so,
stronger.
because I think if when it comes to the singing and songwriting, I'd imagine to kind of keep things fresh, people may need to have a break, because they're like, I need to recharge, because your best work is when you got full of energy. And if you're touring and then you got to come out with albums, not that I know, I'd imagine that is exhausting work.
Sure, sure. And then, yeah, and staying interesting and living a life and applying creativity to actually lived experiences, because I think that's what, I'm sorry, who did you speak to who was saying, yeah, it's just you're backstage and you're
Yeah,
playing.
Jay Aston from Bucks Fizz, very
Yeah.
British band, and from sort of like the early '80s, and they're still touring now. But she was saying about the going on stage, touring, coming off stage, and she got burnt out, and then the band kind of split. That bit a serious bus accident, cool bus accident.
Mm,
But I'm getting out now, even if it means
yeah.
breaking my contract.
Right. Well, if I could just kind of cleave a piece off of that, it's not
Yeah,
really always that inspiring to write songs when you're in those environments, particularly if you're facing a trauma. with your band, like an accident. Yeah, I used to make this joke in the is where the only really interesting thing was listening to the ice melt in the beverage bucket backstage.
Yeah.
Well, I know, but it's like this example of there's not that much interesting events to really like pull on to be creative
Yeah.
about. It really is like going out and living life and having family and all these other things that you then up writing about. But, most people start their careers as young people. So they're writing about things that are like relative to
Yeah.
20-year-olds and your 20-year-old life and the complexities of emotion. And then you're in your 40s and it's like, okay, well, now what do you have to say? And you have a
Yeah.
lot to say. You have a lot to say. It's just like, people don't really relate to it. So relate to that idea that no, artists keep producing, they keep going, they keep creating bodies of work. But if you're like a visual artist, usually you're doing a show once a year and you're showing your body of work of that year. Musicians have to go, it's like the opposite. Musicians are like playing 300 dates a year and then having to take a month off to write and record.
Yeah, you can see how exhausting it is there as well, and why
Right.
artists take a break, and you can see why some singers or whatever walk away or quit. Whereas you're just like the public, you're like, well, why would you ever want to do that? But when you got somebody that's been the other side of it, it makes
Sure.
common sense. It as a therapist, just it sounds exhausting. If you could just turn up on stage, if you could just sing the songs, but everything else that goes with it, there, you can see how time consuming it is there. But
Yeah, it's definitely fatiguing. You really do have to look at your health and like a well-being in like a different manner, almost like an athlete without being an athlete.
so you've been together like 40 years now. You got the fifth anniversary coming up in October. It sounds like you're having as much fun as ever before.
I love it. It's super fun.
Yeah. What would you say the difference is now? As in coming out on stage, is there any difference performing now to what there was, whether it's 20, 30 years ago?
Yeah, I don't and that this is just a difference between being a person my age and a person in their 20s. It's like, I don't feel that I have anything to prove. There's not necessarily a career stakes stacked on top of this. I have other ways that I earn an income now.
Yeah.
So, I'm not like risking feeding myself that's what it feels like, at least through
So
back
can
when
you
we
enjoy it?
started.
Can you
Yeah.
enjoy it? Take the
Enjoy
pressure
it,
off.
being more in the moment. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. But there is a thing. I mean, it really is, when you're an audience member and you go see a band, you want to hear those songs that you know. But for a
Yeah.
performer, it's just like, oh my gosh, do we really have to play this one again? You really do. Like, is there any way to breathe new life into this song? Or, there is those thoughts. And that it's natural, I think.
Yeah, of course, because I'll get that. But I mean, with a lot of your fans, there's going to be people that's been following you for 40 years. You probably know a lot of them that come to the
No,
gigs
I
and
I don't. I think that,
no,
no, I don't. I think that we've sort of engaged with new audiences on each generation. Like
yeah,
well, I can't believe it. I look in the audience and I'm seeing young, shiny faces, and I just think,
yeah.
how did you hear about this show?
I think it's
We
like
started doing a reunion tours. We took
yeah,
the band took a break after I left. Like, the band went on, did a record, did some great touring. Um, and then they took a break also in the early 2000s. And, so we came back in what, 90, what year, 2016, maybe 2015, 2016, released a documentary called Pretend We're Dead, which I think is available if anyone wants to go check it out. It's really great. And we started doing this reunion, and that reunion, turned into the COVID, but, everything kind of got shut down. We released another record called Scatter the Rats, and everything kind of got shut down. And so we sort of have been on a reunion. Now it's been 10 years, which is the length of time I was actually in the band to begin with. Now it's just, life is bizarre. Just don't give up.
yeah,
Just take a breath.
yeah, definitely.
You
And
never know what's going to happen.
no, you don't. You never know. You never
Just
know
keep
what.
showing up and doing the work.
Yeah, definitely. And what's next for the band and yourself? Keep on going, keep doing, or anything else planned?
Thank you. So for L7, we're making some decisions about what to do about next year. So stay in touch. um,
Definitely.
I released my own like sort of podcast and Substack called Shit My Rockstar Says. I don't know, do you need to bleep that? Which
No,
is
no,
okay.
this is
Me.
just me and you talking.
Okay,
Say
great.
what you
Where I kind of like, it's a newsletter for what I'm doing. I do a lot of public appearances and I do readings. I write essays. I just started to do memoir style essays. And really, if there's anything, if I'm not here to promote anything, really, I'm just
Yeah.
saying like what I'm into. Also, Courage is the Change is on Instagram. If anyone wants to just follow that and kind of encourage me to keep doing it because it's like a little bit tiring. But yeah, I really would love people to subscribe to Shit My Rockstar Says and to the Jennifer Finch newsletter because I'll be making announcements there on upcoming releases. I said I was a photographer. I've never done a book before, but I'll do like, fanzine style drops that are, limited edition, like 20 drops for $20 or something. So just so everyone can just follow what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's great. Well, all of the links we
How's my
included.
pitch on that? How's my pitch? I feel
It's
I
good.
have one of my like critical character defects that I continually have to address is undervaluing myself. Like,
Yeah,
oh,
definitely
I'm
don't.
doing this thing. You can follow it if
Uh,
you want.
yeah. It's because you never worked in sales. I can give you tips.
Yeah.
No, I think that's great. And all your links, we'll have them included in the episode description there as well. So
Thank you
people
so
can-
much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's easy enough to do there as well. And obviously come back on and do a part 2 as well, because you got so many interesting stories there as well.
Oh,
So,
lovely. Thank you so much. This was so amazingly. Thank you for doing
oh,
such great work in the world.
well, I'm trying my best there, but the podcast is brilliant. And what I love about the podcast is the variety of guests I've got on, the interesting stories there as well. And yours is just so amazing, so engrossing. I could talk to you for hours about your story, just ask you question after question.
Wow. Well, thank you. You did
So,
great.
thank you so much. Thank you for coming on. Thanks, Jennifer. Thank you.
Bye.